Jesse and I did a lot of work that weekend, and we did it with the mindset that we were curved Earth tourists. We did it hoping our efforts would benefit those that came behind us. Certainly we had the models that predict our observations, and our observations and measurements certainly validated the model. Two different techniques, Jesse's data and my photography, both arriving at the same conclusion. Yet we were left with a nagging question, what else will it take? Hopefully this video answers that question.
When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Earth from a bird's eye view. You should grow feathers and see this too. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. When you want to get off the darkest ground, gravity pulls you straight down. Clear sky. Where am I? When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Earth from a bird's eye view. You should grow feathers and see this too. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. When you want to get off the darkest ground, but gravity pulls you straight down. Clear sky. Where am I?
Long story short, flat earthers don't get to choose what they think the globe model is. The globe model has a definition. It has a shape, it has a geometry. They might not believe that the earth itself is that shape, but the model is for certain that shape. When you take that model and you put structures on that model, other models of structures, like this causeway, for example, you can then determine what the predictions of a particular observation will be. It's a model. So it's not going to be exactly the same in reality, because obviously this causeway isn't exactly the same. It's not built exactly like the real world causeway. It's not meant to. It's meant to be a rough approximation of what you expect to see. This is a rough approximation of what you would expect to see if you went to the 15th floor of the Marriott and took a photograph of the causeway. So then when you actually go to the 15th floor of the Marriott and you take a picture, and that picture looks like the model, then what you have just done is validated that model. The only model that we know of that actually predicts this observation is the globe model. The globe model does not predict a curving horizon in 800 meters, which is what we just determined a second ago using Google Earth. Google Earth, here is a windmill right here. If you zoom out and you go up here a couple miles, there's also a water tower right here. These lines are line of sight from the Marriott. So then we can measure this distance here, which is about 200 meters. And then we can compare that to what we see on this photograph here. And then we can compare that to the full frame of the photograph. And we determine that the photograph is about 800 meters. So less than a kilometer wide is that horizon cutting off and obstructing the shoreline over there. That is less than 800 meters. You're not going to see curvature with your eyes or camera in a 0.8 degree field of view, 800 meters, you're not going to see it. You shouldn't even expect to see it. The model predictions, these observations validate it. End of story. Flat Earth is burning in embers and crying about it. You cannot look at this image and with a sane mind say it's not curving. This is the prediction of the globe. This is the observation. It's very clear. There's no mirroring. There's no atmospheric effects going on. There it is. That's the curve of the Earth. Get over it. Time to grow up. Move on to chemtrails. Something else. It's over.
Hey viewers, welcome back. Recently I had the opportunity to go visit the San Francisco area. While I was there, I made plans to go to Mount Tam. Now I've been there before. Mount Tam has amazing views, so I brought my camera with me this time. You can clearly see downtown San Francisco from Mount Tam. You can even see a piece of the Golden Gate if you look hard enough. San Francisco is about 13 miles away. But off in the distance you can see Mount Diablo. Mount Diablo is about 36 miles away, and it's close to the horizon, so I thought it would be an interesting analysis. Let's take a look at it. GPS coordinates provided by Google Location History are slightly off. I was a bit higher, right next to the fire lookout. That's Mount Diablo there in the background. Mount Diablo is rather tall, and it sits very close to the horizon. So let's do an analysis. So from Mount Tam, the fire lookout, I'm looking 36.4 miles. Now let's look at the model predictions. The reoccurring problem that we run into is that flat earthers misapply the d squared times 8 divided by 12 estimate. If the distance is 36.4 miles, then they would calculate the curvature to be 883.3 feet. The problem occurs when flat earthers decide to conflate curvature with obstruction height. For an honest analysis, we should provide the GPS coordinates of both the target and the observer, giving us the distance between them, the height of the observer, and the altitude of the target. We should first determine if the object is actually closer than the horizon. So, using the distance to the horizon formula, and knowing the radius of the Earth in feet and the height of the observer in feet, we can determine how far the horizon should be. In this case, from Mount Tam, Mount Diablo is actually closer than the horizon, so therefore no obstruction should be expected. Unfortunately, many flat earthers in this situation would now ask, where are the 883 feet of missing curvature? Well, obviously that's an incorrect question and not something that's predicted by the conventional model. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to leave you with some of the photographs that I took from the top of Mount Tam, just for your viewing pleasure. Have a good one.
You probably, when you first came to the subject, had who knows how many questions. Where's the edge? Oh, how
Right.
could they be lying? Why are they lying? All these questions that come to your mind are certainly going to come to your friends and family and everyone on your Facebook timelines mind. So you better be prepared to answer them.
So let's not beat around the bush, man. To challenge the heliocentric model of the solar system is pretty blasphemous in today's world. So how do we start to unravel some of this stuff? What are some of the biggest red flags with our traditional understanding that should start putting those first cracks in the listener's preconceived notions?
Sure. Well, just our common sense everyday perception of the Earth, it is flat as far as we can tell. It is motionless as far as we can tell, and everything in the sky is revolving around us as far as we can tell. If nobody told us otherwise, we'd logically assume that the Earth was flat, motionless, with everything in the sky revolving around us. And you can prove that this is the case as well, for instance, with the horizon. As you rise up, no matter how high you go on the top of Mount Everest, or if you go in a balloon higher and higher, as far as 20 miles up and higher, we've gotten independent balloons have gone up with cameras. The horizon remains flat all the way around and rises to the eye of the camera all the way up. Now, if the Earth were a ball, no matter how big, the horizon is said to be the curvature of the ball. So as you rose up, the horizon would stay where it was, and you'd have to look down if you're in a hot air balloon, down further and further as you rose up, and the horizon would be below you. But in fact, as high as any non-NASA, RASA, or other Freemasonic space agency has ever shown us, as far as any independent camera has ever gone up with an independent rocket or balloon, as far as 20 miles up, totally flat and rises to the eye of the observer. So that's one proof. Of course, you can measure curvature if it actually existed. They say the ball Earth is 25,000 miles in circumference, and using spherical trigonometry, it figures out to 8 inches of curvature per mile squared. The mile is squared, so for 2 miles, it would be 2 times 2, 4 times 8 inches, 32 inches. And for the third mile, it's 3 squared, which is 3 times 3, 9 times 8 is 72. So you're going 8, 32, 72, 128 inches, and so on. And this is the kind of curvature that would exist on a ball. And specifically on a ball 25,000 miles in circumference, as they say it is. So you can check with theodolites and telescopes and different methods, lasers, to see if the Earth actually does have that curvature. And it's been tested over and over again and found to have no curvature whatsoever. So I mean, even if they had the number wrong and it was 100,000 miles in circumference, there would still be a calculable, measurable curvature that just isn't there. The only place curvature exists is in NASA photos and videos, and those can be proven to be CGI fakes, and the early ones were literally taken through a round window to make the Earth appear round. And that's it. It's just photo trickery and brainwashing that's got the world thinking that we're on a ball spinning around the sun with a magical force called gravity holding us on the underside of this spinning ball. It's all just brainwashing that we've received. It's pseudoscience accepted as legit science, but real science has confirmed geocentricity in the flat Earth for thousands of years. The flat Earth was known to ancient cultures all over the world for thousands of years, and it's actually a relatively recent phenomenon that people have been believing we're on a big ball spinning around the sun. Pythagoras first came up with it about 2,500 years ago. He's also often considered the first Freemason, and it didn't go anywhere much from there until 2,000 years later. Copernicus picked up where he left off, another Jesuit Freemason, and he really picked things up, and Kepler and Galileo and Newton, and now Einstein and NASA, Sagan and Neil deGrasse Tyson, all these people, they're all part of this Freemasonic club that is building a pseudo-scientific worldview to indoctrinate the slave class.
Yeah, right. I think you make a lot of great points, man, and I think the curvature argument is pretty damn strong. And I pulled this off your website in the comments section because, to your credit, you spend a lot of time writing thorough answers to questions and responses to critics, and that's where a lot of my questions got answered. And so here's a little more detail about the curvature argument from your site. It seems like lighthouses are one great example. This first one you have is the Isle of Wight Lighthouse in England. It's 180 feet high and can be seen up to 42 miles away, a distance at which modern astronomers say the light should fall 996 feet below the line of sight. Why can you still see it? And then you have several other good examples in the lighthouse department, but another one worth mentioning that people be familiar with is the Statue of Liberty. It stands 326 feet above sea level, and on a clear day can be seen as far as 60 miles away. Now, if the Earth was a globe at the dimensions that they give us, that would put Lady Liberty at an impossible 2,074 feet below the horizon. These examples seem hard to rectify unless there's some obvious answer that I'm missing, but I would say this is a pretty compelling thread of evidence, my man.
Yeah, the distance at which the light from lighthouses can be seen at sea is just way too far for the Earth to be a ball 25,000 miles in circumference. Another great example is the Notre Dame Antwerp spire, standing 403 feet high from the foot of the tower, with Strasbourg measuring 468 feet above sea level. And so with the spire should be an entire mile, 5,280 feet below the horizon. Another one is just the natural physics of water. It's the natural physics of water to find and remain at level. If water is dammed up and then released, it will flow out in all directions until it becomes level again. But on a spinning ball Earth, we would have to have oceans that were hundreds of miles of curved water. And this is impossible. I mean, they can't show you any example of this happening, but they claim this is what's happening on the Earth.
Water always finds its level, whether it's in a glass, whether it's in a bathtub, whether it's in a swimming pool, whether it's in a lake, whether it's an ocean. Water is always level. That's why we use water as a leveling tool. Nowadays we have lasers, so you can check again, and the laser will level out over the water. The horizon is always flat. And not only is it flat, 360 degrees around you, no matter how high you rise, it rises with you, because it's the law of perspective we were talking about, and not the curvature of a ball. If the horizon was the curvature of the ball Earth, as you've been taught, then as you rose above it, no matter how big that ball was, it could be 1,000,000 times bigger than they say the Earth is. If it's a ball, it will curve away from you. And as you rise up, you would have to tilt your head and look down further and further to be able to see that horizon. But you'll never look down to the horizon on our Earth. It will always rise up right with you. And as you turn around, it'll be 360 degrees flat and at eye level, unless you're recording with a GoPro camera, and then it will change to convex and concave depending on the dip and the tilt of the camera, because it's a wide-angle lens. This is what the Red Bull Dive used on their outside camera. At 128,000 feet, you can see the curve of the Earth, which was the exact same curve of the Earth. If you watch right from the liftoff, when they started, the Earth was already curving that exact amount, because it's just a wide-angle lens. And then as they go up 128,000 feet, horizon's still there, and then the inside camera gives it away, which was not a wide-angle lens. As they opened the door, parallel, right at eye level, the horizon was totally flat.
Sergeant Mark here. Welcome, FBI recruit. In order to become an effective agent, you must learn how to infiltrate conspiracy theories. This will require you to master the propaganda and deception techniques of flat earthers. By studying these techniques in real-life scenarios, you too can become an effective FBI agent.
It's just going to be slow and not cooperate because you're live.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
In this scenario, the flat earther has mischaracterized the opponent. We at the FBI like to call this technique mischaracterized to bastardize. Even though they know that Earthshine was first discovered by simply tweaking the exposure levels, the flat earth opponent took the time to make a more presentable image. We can use this to our advantage. The layperson will simply not watch the original video and learn the proper context. In this way, you too can become an effective recruit and learn to infiltrate the Flat Earth movement. The mischaracterized to bastardized technique is a valuable tool to convince Flat Earthers that you're one of them. Let's listen in as a fellow agent gish gallops with a mark.
And he said he had to do that, then he had to take it in another program and do something else, and he had to take another program and do something. I mean, this big, long process he made out of it. And I think he was just doing that for all show because you don't have to go through all that. And this is where I pulled out his image. I actually took the time to pull it out.
In this scenario, the Flat Earther relies on the faulty short-term memories of the layperson. We at the FBY like to refer to this technique as pigeon memory. You too can employ this technique anytime you need to replicate the techniques of your opponent while also making them look incompetent.
I got in contact with Sean, Red's Rhetoric, and Soundly, and Miles. I had them all. And I got the supposed real photos that Soundly used.
This technique is known as the implicit discredit. You should use this technique anytime the opponent has evidence which obviously crushes your theory. You must first try to discredit the evidence to the layperson. This makes it sound like the evidence is in question, even when it conclusively undermines your claims.
And Soundly sent this to me. He goes, here are the files that have been shared by Sean Hufford or me. Okay, so he's trying to Sean Hufford or me. Well, who shared it?
The irrelevant gotcha can be used to cast a sinister light upon innocent, rational, trivial, and otherwise irrelevant comments made by your opponent. In this case, the Flat Earther expresses false outrage at the fact that a digital file can be shared by many people amongst many people. However, to the layperson, this casts a sinister and dubious light upon the commenter. Use this technique to subtly attack the character of your opponent. Let's hear what the original commenter had to say for additional context. This is from an interview with the FBY.
This is the Google Drive folder that I created that has all the different versions of the file in question. That's AH1_3659.jpg. We basically tracked the chain of custody of the file. Sean had shared the file by removing metadata of the author. I had shared the file by removing metadata of the author. Those two files were not exactly the same. However, the digital image in those two files was exactly the same. So what we did was we collected all of the files in one place so that it was easy access for anyone. Also contained in this Google Drive folder is methods for verifying that the file that you may have is actually one of these files, or at least that the file that you may have is visually identical to one of our original files. And of course we had to create this because Mike Helmick, Anthony Riley, and Glowbusters were all passing files around in which they claimed there were Photoshop tags and 72 DPI overlays, which is absurd. You can't have a 72 DPI overlay in a 300 DPI image.
When all of your efforts have failed against an opponent, you are still left with one valuable technique known as doxing.
So he's already not, because we know we know his name. We know Soundly's name. We're not going to give it here.
By doxing your opponent, you threaten exposure of their personal identification on the internet. In this example, our two Flat Earthers and a third co-conspirator, not in this video, all use the personal name of the artist who took the eclipse photograph. This was an attempt to dox and threaten doxing their opponent. You may at this point realize that the previous implicit discredit is now moot, as the Flat Earthers had the original image all along. However, by carefully applying the pigeon memory technique, a crafty agent can apply both techniques at the same time.
We'll just keep that private, but he kind of freaked out over that. And their SHA-1 hash codes along with helpful links on how to generate. And so they have already run their images through forensic software.
Relying on the observation that Flat Earth minions will not fact-check their gurus, we can use the false attribution technique. By claiming your opponent has said something they have not, or done something they have not, you can distract away from your own fraud or incompetence.
And when I was on Sean's chat, while he was doing his live video hangout. They said, yeah, we ran him through the forensic photo software and everything. There's nothing wrong with it.
In this example, the false attribution was used to cover up the fact that one player had already admitted to fraud, while other players accused the original commenter of fraud. Even though the claims of our agent and Flat Earther bordered on lunacy, Flat Earth minions will be sure to latch onto the false attribution instead. Let's hear what the original commenter had to say.
So what I did was look up the SHA hash codes to identify specific files that we knew were in fact our files. And we also provided tools such as ImageMagic's compare tool, so you could visually compare a file that you knew was authentic with any file you may have received from Globebusters, Helmick, or Riley.
Even though our agent and the Flat Earther were completely incompetent with SHA codes, an effective agent can rely on the Flat Earther's inability to fact-check false attributions. Often, gish galloping with multiple false attributions is even more effective.
And when I was on Sean's chat, while he was doing his live video hangout, they said, yeah, we ran him through the forensic photo software and everything. There's nothing wrong with those photos.
Once again, let's hear from the original commenter.
To be clear, we did not do any photo forensics on our own photographs. We didn't need to do that. That's ridiculous. It was a picture off of a camera. What we did was provide people with the tools to be sure that they didn't get conned by these con artists.
As an agent, once you successfully build your false narrative, issuing a public challenge an hour or more deep into a hangout that no one right-minded would be bothered to watch is a good way to provide a false sense of credibility in the eyes of Flat Earth minions.
Yeah, well, here's the problem, though. We're meant to do that so that we can work out and satisfy ourselves that there's nothing wrong with it. And that's why I'm inviting Soundly or Sean or anybody, Red's Rhetoric. You can have the imagery that we have, and if you can find fault with it, do a video, show us where we're going wrong.
Instead of relying on experts, use big words that make you sound like an expert yourself. In this case, our agent and Flat Earther are both pretending to be photo forensic experts.
Because obviously you can do something with the forensics that we cannot.
Let's hear another example of that interview of the Flat Earth opponent.
Anthony Riley is known for this. He uses management speak, authoritative sounding words like photo forensics. When people throw out a number of weak arguments back to back to back, this is known as gish gallop.
It's an effort to establish yourself as the authority on a subject by piling up a number of weak arguments while
making it extremely hard to respond to all of the different accusations, even though all of the accusations are completely false. Anthony Riley is constantly practicing gish gallop in response to my observations. He's put out numerous videos and made numerous claims and accusations against my observations. But to paraphrase Einstein, if I were wrong, then only one would have been enough. Riley has been shown to be incompetent, and here we are with yet another example.
Excellent job, Agent Riley. You make your country proud. By becoming an expert at these techniques, you too can become an effective agent, just like Agent Riley. Be sure to study. This will be on your final exams.
So right. I encourage, invite, and totally expect you to do this.
Sergeant Mark here. Welcome, FBI recruit. In order to become an effective agent, you must learn how to infiltrate conspiracy theories. This will require you to master the propaganda and deception techniques of Flat Earthers. Today's lesson